Officer Daniel Reed had seen many strange things in his 12 years on the force, but nothing prepared him for the tiny German Shepherd puppy that kept following him everywhere he went. Every time he took a step, the puppy followed. Every time he stopped, it stared at him, pleading, shaking, refusing to blink. At first, he thought it was just a lost pup, until the little dog started bringing him something unexpected, something that made his heart stop. Every bark, every whine, was a desperate message the puppy was trying to deliver. Then Daniel noticed something else: urgency in the puppy's eyes. The puppy cried whenever Daniel tried to walk away, as if it was trying to warn him. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. But when Daniel finally discovered why this trembling puppy had chosen him, the truth shattered him. Stay with us. This story will leave you in tears. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Officer Daniel Reed had barely taken his first sip of morning coffee when something unusual caught his attention. The sun had just risen over the quiet neighborhood, brushing the streets in soft gold. Daniel, leaning against his patrol car, scanned the area out of habit, observant, alert, and steady. But then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed something incredibly small wobbling toward him on tiny paws. At first, he thought it was a squirrel, then maybe a stray cat. But when it stepped into the light, Daniel blinked in surprise. It was a puppy, a tiny German Shepherd puppy, no bigger than a shoe, staring directly at him with wide, shiny eyes. Daniel frowned. Puppies didn't wander around alone like this, especially not breeds like this one. He glanced around, searching for an owner, a leash, anything, but the street was empty. The world felt unusually still except for the soft tapping of tiny paws on the pavement. The pup stopped just a few feet away from him, head tilted, ears perked, tail barely curled behind him. "Hey, little guy," Daniel muttered, kneeling slightly. "Where's your human?" He expected the puppy to hesitate, maybe run away. But instead, the puppy took a few shaky steps forward, then sat down in front of him like he had been waiting for this exact moment. Daniel couldn't help but smile. It had been a long time since anything softened him this early in the morning. But as he leaned closer, the puppy took a sudden step back, as if encouraging him to follow. Daniel stood upright. "What are you doing?" he murmured, watching the pup's tiny chest rise and fall with anxious breaths. He took a step forward. The puppy instantly mirrored him. Daniel paused. The puppy paused. This wasn't normal behavior. Lost puppies were usually frantic, scared, or crying. But this one was determined, focused, almost purposeful. Daniel rubbed his jaw, curiosity flickering through him. "All right, little buddy. Maybe you're just lost." He turned toward his patrol car, planning to check the neighborhood for anyone searching for a missing pet. But the moment he took a step away, a desperate whimper echoed behind him. Daniel stopped. Slowly, he turned back. The puppy was following him again, this time at a tiny sprint, ears pinned back as if terrified Daniel would disappear forever. Daniel's brows furrowed. Something wasn't right. Puppies didn't look at strangers like that, like their entire world depended on them. He crouched again, this time softer. "Why are you following me?" he whispered. The puppy stepped closer, and Daniel's day, his heart, and his life were about to change in ways he never imagined. Daniel tried to shrug it off. Maybe the little guy was just hungry, cold, or confused. Lost puppies sometimes clung to the first kind face they saw. But as Daniel walked down the sidewalk, the soft patter of tiny paws followed right behind him like a shadow. He glanced back. The puppy froze. Daniel raised an eyebrow. The puppy tilted his head. "Seriously," Daniel muttered under his breath. He kept walking, this time faster, intending to test the puppy's persistence. The pup immediately scampered after him, his tiny legs moving as fast as they could, ears flopping with each determined step. Daniel shook his head. "Buddy, you're gonna wear yourself out." When he reached a nearby convenience store, Daniel pushed the door open. The bell chimed. He stepped inside, intending to ask the cashier if anyone had been looking for a missing pup. But then, a sudden, heart-wrenching cry echoed outside. Daniel spun around. Through the glass door, he saw the puppy scratching desperately at the bottom of the frame, panicking the second Daniel disappeared from sight. His tiny claws tapped anxiously against the metal strip, his whole body trembling. The cashier looked up. "Officer, is that little guy yours?" "No," Daniel said, staring at the trembling pup. "He just keeps following me." "Well," the cashier chuckled softly, "he sure thinks you're his new family." Daniel didn't laugh. Something about the puppy's fear hit deeper than he expected. This wasn't playful attachment. This was desperation. Pure, shaking desperation. He stepped back outside. Instantly, the puppy rushed toward him, practically tripping over his own legs. He pressed himself against Daniel's boot, tail wagging weakly, not happily, but in raw relief. Daniel crouched again, softer this time. Hey, I'm right here." The puppy licked his pant leg, then looked up with glossy eyes that seemed to hold a message Daniel couldn't decipher yet. He sighed. "All right, let's get you checked out." He walked toward his patrol car, but the puppy didn't just follow. He glued himself to Daniel's heel like a tiny guardian refusing to lose sight of him even for a second. Daniel opened the car door. Before he could react, the puppy attempted to climb in. "Whoa, easy." Daniel caught him mid-hop. The puppy whimpered and pawed at his uniform, begging to be held. Daniel exhaled slowly. "You really don't want me to leave, do you?" He lifted the trembling pup into his arms. At that moment, Daniel realized this wasn't random. This puppy wasn't following him by accident. He was trying to tell him something. By the time Daniel reached the main street, the morning rush had begun. Parents walked their kids to school, joggers passed by with headphones on, and shop owners raised their shutters for the day. And right in the middle of all the movement was Daniel, and the tiny German Shepherd puppy glued to his feet like a living shadow. A group of teenagers spotted him first. "Oh, officer, is that your new partner?" one of them teased, laughing as the puppy trotted proudly beside him. Daniel tried to keep a straight face. "He's not mine," he said, adjusting his duty belt. "He's just persistent." Another teen pointed. "He follows you better than my dog follows me." People chuckled, but Daniel wasn't amused. He was too focused on the puppy's behavior, the way he constantly looked up at him, the tiny whimpers in his throat, the trembling ears. This wasn't a mischievous puppy seeking attention. There was something deeper, heavier behind those eyes. An elderly woman stepped out of a bakery, wiping flour from her hands. "Oh dear," she said warmly, "he's all skin and bones. Looks like he trusts you." Daniel exhaled. "I don't know why. I've never seen him before today." "You must have a good heart," the woman said gently. Daniel didn't respond. Compliments always made him uncomfortable. But the puppy seemed encouraged by her words. He pressed himself against Daniel's boot, as if hiding behind him for safety. A little girl approached, clutching her mother's hand. "Can I pet him?" she asked shyly. Before Daniel could answer, the puppy startled, retreating behind his leg. His tiny body shook with fear. The little girl's mother quickly pulled her back. "Oh, sorry, officer, didn't mean to scare him." "It's okay," Daniel replied softly. "He's been through something. I can tell." The crowd gradually moved on, leaving Daniel and the puppy alone again. But every person who passed by gave the same sympathetic glance, and every glance made Daniel more certain. This puppy wasn't lost. He wasn't wandering. He was searching for something, or someone. Daniel knelt, looking directly into the puppy's frightened, pleading eyes. "You're not just following me," he murmured. "You're trying to lead me somewhere, aren't you?" The puppy let out a tiny, desperate cry, and Daniel's gut tightened. Whatever this little creature knew, it wasn't good. Daniel took a slow breath and lowered himself to one knee, bringing his eyes level with the tiny creature that refused to leave his side. The puppy stared back, chest rising quickly with anxious breaths, as if terrified Daniel might vanish again. The morning breeze rustled through the trees, but the pup didn't flinch. His entire world was focused on one person, Daniel. "Okay, little guy," Daniel murmured, softening his voice. "Let's see what's going on with you." He reached out a cautious hand. The puppy didn't run, didn't bark, didn't hesitate. Instead, he stepped forward and gently pressed his head against Daniel's palm, releasing a tiny, exhausted sigh. Daniel's brows knitted together. This wasn't normal, skittish puppy behavior. This was relief. Deep, desperate relief. Daniel gently lifted the pup's chin, checking for a collar. Nothing. No tag. No ID. Just a small piece of torn fabric loosely tied around his neck, dirty, frayed, and stained with something Daniel couldn't quite identify. "What happened to you?" he whispered. He slid his fingers through the puppy's fur and paused. The pup whimpered as Daniel's hand brushed over a tender spot near his shoulder. Daniel examined it carefully. The fur was matted, the skin beneath slightly bruised. The paws were dusty and scraped, as if he had been running for miles on rough ground. Daniel's heart tightened. Who lets a puppy get like this? He checked the pup's ribs next. Too visible, too sharp. The puppy had been starving for at least a day, maybe longer. Daniel looked into the pup's wide, watery eyes again, and the truth hit him harder than expected. This little dog wasn't being cute. He wasn't being clingy. He was asking for help. But then, something unexpected happened. The puppy stepped back, walked a few circles, and then tugged gently at Daniel's pant leg with his tiny teeth. Not aggressively, not playfully, purposefully. "You trying to show me something?" Daniel asked. The puppy tugged again, harder this time, his ears pinned back with urgency. Daniel rose slowly. The puppy trotted a few feet forward, stopped, looked back, whined. Daniel followed a step. The puppy lit up with hope and repeated the action, guiding him further away from the busy street and toward a narrow dirt path that led into the trees. Daniel felt a sudden chill. Lost puppies didn't act like this. "All right," he said quietly, hand resting on his holster out of instinct. "Lead the way." The puppy turned, tail lowered, and began guiding him toward a place Daniel couldn't see yet. But the dread in Daniel's stomach whispered that he needed to follow. The puppy darted ahead, his tiny paws kicking up soft dust as he followed the narrow dirt path. Daniel stayed a few steps behind, his instincts on full alert. Years on the force had taught him one truth. When something felt off, it usually was. And everything about this situation felt off. The pup paused every few feet, glancing over his shoulder to make sure Daniel was still following. Each time Daniel met his gaze, the puppy's tail would give a tiny, hopeful wag before he pushed onward. It was as if he feared losing the officer, even for a second. "Slow down, buddy," Daniel called softly. "I'm right here." The puppy let out a small whine but obeyed, slowing his pace until Daniel caught up. Then, with surprising determination, he continued pulling the officer deeper down the path. The city noise faded behind them, replaced by rustling leaves, distant birds, and the soft crunch of footsteps. Daniel scanned the surroundings. This wasn't a place people usually walked. The path was narrow, partly overgrown and tucked between tall hedges and an unused parking lot. The kind of place people passed every day without noticing, and the kind of place where someone might hide something, or someone. "Where are you taking me?" Daniel murmured, eyes narrowing. The puppy answered with another urgent tug at his pant leg, then hurried a few more steps. His movements grew more frantic the farther they walked. His breaths came quicker and he kept stopping to sniff the ground as if searching for something familiar. Suddenly, the puppy froze. His ears shot upward. His body stiffened. A fearful whimper escaped his throat. Daniel reached for his radio out of instinct but didn't press the button yet. Instead, he crouched beside the pup. "What is it?" he whispered. The puppy backed up until he touched Daniel's boot, trembling. His tiny chest heaved with rapid breaths. He looked ahead, toward the next bend in the trail, and let out a soft, broken cry. Daniel's pulse quickened. "Is someone hurt?" he asked, his voice steady but low. The puppy stepped forward again, shaking, and gave the gentlest push with his head, urging Daniel to keep going. And that's when Daniel saw it. Just past the bend, half hidden beneath fallen branches and leaves, something glinted in a patch of sunlight. Metallic. Unnatural. Out of place. The puppy whimpered louder, scratching at the ground. Daniel stood, heart pounding. Whatever lay ahead, this puppy was desperately trying to lead him to it. Daniel stepped cautiously toward the faint glimmer beneath the branches, every muscle tightening with instinct. The puppy stayed glued to his heel, trembling but determined, as if the tiny creature's duty outweighed its fear. Daniel brushed aside a cluster of dry leaves, revealing the source of the reflection. A broken piece of metal. Not rusted, fresh. Recently dropped. He lifted it between his fingers. A zipper pull. One that belonged to a purse or backpack. Daniel's jaw clenched. Someone was here. The puppy whimpered and nudged his leg, begging him to keep moving. Daniel pocketed the metal piece and scanned the narrow pathway. The ground ahead was disturbed. Faint impressions in the soil, smudged footprints, scuffed marks in the dirt. Someone had walked this route. And not calmly. "All right," Daniel whispered. "Lead me." The puppy darted ahead again, staying just far enough to guide him, but close enough to feel safe. Daniel followed with deliberate steps, hand resting near his holster, eyes sweeping every shadow. The deeper they moved into the path, the denser the trees became on either side. Branches stretched overhead like skeletal arms, filtering the sunlight into fractured beams. The air felt different here. Still, heavy, almost holding its breath. Daniel's instincts prickled. This wasn't just a random place a puppy would wander. Someone had come through here with purpose. Someone who didn't want to be found. The puppy paused again, nose pressed to the ground, sniffing furiously. His tail lowered, ears flattening with worry. Then he let out a single sharp bark before racing farther into the brush. "Hey!" Daniel called, quickening his pace. He pushed past low branches, stepping over roots and fallen twigs, until he caught sight of the puppy again, standing perfectly still, completely silent, staring into a small clearing up ahead. Daniel slowed, senses sharpening. "What do you see?" The puppy didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply waited, body frozen with dread. Daniel stepped beside him, and then he saw why. The clearing was littered with signs of a struggle. Broken twigs, uneven drag marks in the dirt, and a scrap of fabric snagged on a thorny bush. The same color as the torn cloth tied around the puppy's neck. Daniel's chest tightened. "This isn't random." The puppy whimpered, circling the scrap of fabric, then pressing his tiny paws into the dirt as if pointing. Daniel knelt, examining the scene carefully. Whoever had been here, they hadn't left willingly. He looked at the puppy, whose eyes shone with grief and urgency. "All right, little guy," Daniel murmured. "I'm with you. Show me the rest." The puppy turned toward the forest's shadows, and the real trail began. Puppy led Daniel deeper into the forest, where the sunlight barely touched the ground. The farther they walked, the more the world behind them faded. The traffic sounds vanished. The city hum disappeared, and all that remained was the soft crunch of dried leaves beneath their feet. The trees thickened on both sides, bending inward as if trying to hide whatever lay ahead. Daniel kept scanning the surroundings, muscles taut. This was no longer just curiosity, It was turning into a full-scale investigation, and his smallest guide walked with the determination of a trained K9, pausing only to sniff the air or check that Daniel was close behind. "Good boy," Daniel whispered whenever the pup hesitated. "I'm right here." The path narrowed until it felt almost invisible, swallowed by overgrown bushes and tangled roots. Daniel had to push branches aside with his forearm just to continue forward. The puppy, in contrast, slipped easily through the tight spaces, turning back each time, with a soft, urgent whine. Then, as they rounded a bend, the forest suddenly opened up into a small, hidden clearing. Daniel stopped in his tracks. The clearing looked untouched by the outside world, quiet, isolated, completely hidden unless someone knew how to find it. Shafts of muted sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating patches of ground in pale gold. But beneath that peaceful glow was something darker, something that made Daniel's heartbeat slow. There were signs everywhere, footprints, multiple sets, broken branches, trampled leaves, a long drag mark, like something heavy had been pulled across the forest floor. And in the center of it all, half buried beneath a pile of leaves, something metallic caught Daniel's eye again. The puppy rushed toward it, letting out a sharp cry. Daniel followed, kneeling as he brushed aside the debris. It was a purse, or rather, what was left of one, dirty, torn, the fabric shredded like it had been ripped off in a struggle. A broken strap dangled from the side, and the zipper was missing its pull, the same zipper piece Daniel had found earlier. His stomach dropped. This wasn't random. Someone had been taken. And this puppy, this tiny, terrified puppy, had witnessed everything. The pup circled the purse, nose pressed to it, tail tucked tightly between his legs. He let out a low whine, a sound so full of fear and longing that Daniel felt it in his chest. He knelt beside the pup. "You knew her," Daniel said quietly. "Didn't you?" The puppy pressed his head against the torn purse and closed his eyes. And Daniel realized the truth. The puppy wasn't just guiding him. He was begging him to save someone. Daniel swallowed hard as he lifted the torn purse into his hands. The fabric was cold, damp from the forest floor, and carried a faint scent of perfume mixed with earth. He turned it over carefully, searching for anything, a wallet, an ID card, a name, but everything inside had been emptied out. Someone had cleaned it out before discarding it. The puppy pawed frantically at the dirt beside Daniel, letting out short, trembling cries. His snout touched the ground, nose working furiously, tracing invisible lines only he could understand. Daniel watched closely. The puppy wasn't confused. He was tracking. "Easy," Daniel murmured, placing a steady hand on the pup's back. "Show me." The puppy lifted his head, ears twitching, and walked a few steps toward the far end of the clearing. His nose dipped, following the faint drag mark Daniel had noticed earlier. The tiny creature's legs moved quickly, almost too quickly, propelled by panic rather than energy. Daniel followed, eyes narrowed. What happened here? Then the smell hit him. Faint, metallic, wrong. Blood. He stopped sharply. The puppy didn't. He kept going until he reached a patch of leaves soaked with old, dried stains. The pup whimpered, stepping back in fear, tail dropping lower and lower. Daniel bent down, lifting a few leaves between gloved fingers. The stains were dark, sticky, unmistakable. Someone had been bleeding badly. Recently. The forest suddenly felt colder. Daniel drew in a slow breath and scanned the area. More fabric scraps, more scuffed dirt. A partial shoe print. Each detail painted a picture he didn't want to imagine, but couldn't ignore. A struggle, a fall, a desperate fight, and then dragging. Daniel's chest tightened. He'd seen scenes like this before, in cases that never ended well. But this time, he wasn't alone. A witness, one too small to speak but brave enough to lead, was guiding him. The puppy barked suddenly, sharp and urgent. Daniel turned. The pup stood beside a tree trunk, pushing his nose into a tangled patch of weeds. Something white protruded from the brush, half hidden by grass. Daniel approached cautiously, moving the weeds aside. A phone. Cracked, mud-covered, screen shattered. He picked it up, wiping it clean. Enough to see the wallpaper. A young woman smiling, holding the same puppy now trembling at Daniel's feet. His breath caught. "So she's yours," Daniel whispered. The puppy cried and pushed his face against the broken phone, as if trying to reach the woman trapped inside it. Daniel's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. This wasn't just a missing person case. This was an abduction. And the only reason Daniel was standing here was because this tiny dog refused to give up. He rose slowly, gripping the phone tightly. "All right," he said, voice firm, steady. "We're not done. Not by a long shot." The puppy stood at attention, watching him with desperate, hopeful eyes. Daniel turned toward the deeper trees. "Lead me," he said quietly. "Let's find her." Daniel didn't waste another second. He grabbed his radio and pressed the call button hard enough to hear the plastic strain. "Dispatch, this is Officer Reed. I need immediate backup at my location. Possible abduction scene. Send units and a medical team. I'm deep in the North Forest Trail. Mark it urgent." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Officer Reed. Units en route. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes felt like 6 hours. Daniel paced the clearing, eyes scanning every inch of disturbed soil, every broken branch, every place where fear had left a mark. The puppy stayed close to him, circling nervously, letting out small cries that pierced Daniel straight through the chest. "You held on this long," Daniel murmured to the pup. "Help is coming. We're going to find her." Branches snapped behind him. Daniel spun around, hand on his holster. But instead of danger, 3 officers emerged from the trees, pushing through the underbrush with urgency. Detective Morales, the fastest on foot, reached Daniel first. "Reed, what do we have?" she asked, breath short, eyes sharp. "A struggle," Daniel replied immediately. Blood, drag marks, her belongings, scattered everywhere. And this. He held up the cracked phone. Morales's expression hardened. "This is bad." The puppy barked once as if confirming her fear. More officers arrived, roping off the area and documenting the scene. One knelt beside the blood-stained leaves, muttering, "This wasn't just a fall. Someone got hurt badly." Another officer examined the drag marks. "Direction goes deeper into the woods. Someone pulled her away." Morales turned to Daniel. "How did you find this place?" Daniel motioned toward the puppy. Every officer looked down. The little German shepherd stood with his tiny chest puffed out in determination, despite trembling legs. His eyes never left the path where the drag marks continued. "You led him here?" Morales whispered, surprised. Daniel nodded. "He found me this morning. Wouldn't stop following me. He's been trying to tell someone what happened." The officers exchanged glances, half disbelief, half awe. The puppy barked again, louder this time, and rushed toward the edge of the clearing where the forest grew darker. He stopped at the threshold, looking back urgently. "He wants us to follow," Daniel said. Morales didn't hesitate. "Then we go. Everyone move!" Officers grabbed flashlights and radios. The forest swallowed the sound of their boots as they pushed forward, guided by the smallest member of the team. Daniel stayed close behind the pup, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. "Hang on," he whispered to the unseen woman in the woods. "We're coming." The deeper the officers moved into the forest, the quieter everything became. Even the distant hum of traffic vanished until all that remained was the crunch of boots, the rustle of leaves, and the soft, frantic panting of the tiny German shepherd leading the way. Flashlights cut through the shadows as the team followed the narrow trail, each step tightening the coil of tension in Daniel's chest. The puppy didn't slow down, didn't hesitate, didn't look back except to make sure Daniel was still behind him. His small paws moved with a sense of purpose no adult dog could ignore, tail low, ears pinned to catch every distant sound. Every few seconds he would sniff the air and then dash ahead, driven by something stronger than fear. Love. Morales whispered, "I've seen K9s work, but never a puppy doing this." Daniel nodded grimly. He's not searching. He's remembering. He saw what happened. The trail curved, winding deeper through trees so thick their branches knitted together like a dark tunnel. Evidence of struggle reappeared. Broken twigs, smears in the dirt, a long groove where something heavy had been dragged. Officers marking evidence exchanged looks that said everything without a word. Something terrible had happened here. The puppy suddenly stopped. His ears shot up, body frozen, nose lifted toward the wind. Daniel halted instantly, signaling the others to stay quiet. The little pup sniffed again, then bolted to the right, disappearing behind a cluster of thick brush. "After him," Daniel ordered. They pushed through the undergrowth, branches snapping against uniforms, leaves brushing their faces. On the other side was a small drop-off leading into a lower section of the forest floor. The puppy stood at the edge, barking sharply at something below. Daniel climbed down the slope, flashlight in hand. The beam swept across the ground and landed on a long, fallen tree trunk, its roots twisted like skeletal fingers. The puppy raced to the far side of it, barking wildly, claws scraping against the bark. He looked over his shoulder at Daniel, eyes wide with desperate urgency. Daniel's stomach clenched. "She's here," he breathed. "She has to be." Officers fanned out, scanning every inch. Morales kneeled near a patch of disturbed soil. "Something was dragged through here recently. Look at the indentations." The puppy barked. Again, this time louder, sharper, almost screaming. Daniel rushed to him and dropped to his knees. Something lay behind the fallen tree, something barely visible beneath tangled roots and leaves. Daniel reached forward, pulling branches aside with trembling hands. More officers joined him, sweeping away debris until the shape beneath was unmistakable. An arm. Pale. Motionless. The entire team froze. For a moment, the world held its breath. The puppy whimpered and pushed his nose against the arm, crying softly. Daniel's voice broke. "Dear God, is she still alive?" The officers exchanged fearful glances, but no one spoke, because now they all knew. Whatever happened next would decide her fate. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest as he dropped to the forest floor, knees digging into the cold earth. His flashlight trembled in his grip. The officers beside him held their breath, their beams converging on the still arm lying beneath the fallen tree. For a split second, Daniel feared the worst. The forest felt too quiet, too still, too final. But then, a faint movement, so subtle he almost missed it. Her fingers twitched. "Wait, she moved!" Daniel shouted, hope snapping through him like electricity. Morales rushed to his side, voice urgent. "Check for breathing." Daniel leaned in closer, brushing away leaves and dirt until her face came into view. Bruised, bloodied, streaked with dried tears. She looked impossibly fragile, as if a single wind gust could break her. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck. A pulse. Faint, unsteady. But there. "She's alive!" he yelled. The officers sprang into action. 2 of them cleared the branches, lifting them carefully to avoid worsening any injuries. Another radioed for paramedics, voice trembling. "Emergency! We found the victim. She's alive, but critical. We need evacuation now." The puppy squeezed under the officer's arms, scrambling straight to the woman's side. He whimpered, loudly, pushing his tiny head into her cheek, licking the dirt and blood as if he could wake her with love alone. Her eyelids fluttered. Slow, weak, heavy. Then, barely audible, a broken whisper slipped through her cracked lips. "P. Pip." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Is that his name?" he asked gently. The puppy barked softly, pressing closer to her. Her trembling hand lifted, inch by inch, until her fingers brushed against Pip's fur. The moment she felt him, her body relaxed as though a missing piece of her had returned. He didn't leave me," she choked out. "No," Daniel said softly, emotions knotting in his chest. "He led us to you." Her lips curved into the faintest, weakest smile. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye. They dragged me, hurt me, left me here. I thought." She coughed, pain tearing through her voice. "I thought he didn't make it." Pip cried, pressing his small body against her ribs. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He never stopped looking for help. He came all the way into the city to find someone who would follow him, and he chose me." Her eyes opened wider, focusing on Daniel with a mixture of gratitude and desperation. "Thank you. Thank you for following him." Before Daniel could answer, Morales shouted, "Paramedics incoming! Make space!" The forest lit up with red strobe lights as the rescue team climbed down the slope carrying medical equipment. They surrounded the woman, checking her vitals, stabilizing her neck, preparing her for transport. "She's critical but savable," one medic said. "We need to move now." As they lifted her onto the stretcher, Pip tried to climb with her, panic exploding in his tiny body. Daniel scooped him up gently, holding him close. "Easy, Pip," he whispered. "You're coming too. We're not leaving her." The puppy stopped struggling and pressed against Daniel's chest, shaking. And in that moment, Daniel realized, this wasn't just a rescue. This was a miracle forged from pure loyalty. The ambulance raced toward the hospital, sirens splitting the air as Daniel sat beside the stretcher with Pip curled tightly in his lap. The tiny puppy refused to look away from the woman, his trembling body pressed against the metal frame as if afraid she would disappear again. Daniel kept a protective hand on him, though the little pup hardly seemed aware of anything except her fragile rise and fall of breath. The woman's eyelids fluttered weakly, struggling to stay open. A paramedic adjusted the oxygen mask covering her mouth, murmuring, "Ma'am, you're safe now. Try to stay awake. You're doing great." Her gaze drifted toward Daniel, barely focusing. Is he okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling like broken glass. Daniel followed her eyes to Pip. "He's right here. He found us. He found you." Tears welled in her bruised eyes. I thought they killed him." Pip whimpered loudly, pushing his nose into her hand as if begging her not to fade again. She managed to curl her fingers around his tiny paw. Daniel leaned closer. "Can you tell me what happened? Anything at all? It might help us catch the people who did this." Her breath hitched. She blinked slowly, gathering what little strength she had. "I was walking home from the grocery store," she began, voice faint but steadying with each word. "It was late, too late. I shouldn't have gone alone." The paramedic nodded but stayed silent, allowing her to continue. "I heard footsteps behind me. Fast ones. Before I could turn around, someone grabbed me. 2 men. One held me down. The other took my purse." She paused, wincing as the memory stabbed through her. Daniel felt his jaw clench. "They dragged me into a van. I tried to scream, but one of them hit me. I dropped everything, even my phone." Her eyes closed for a moment. "But Pip didn't run." Pip cried softly at her words, pressing his paws against her arm. "He bit one of them," she whispered. "This tiny baby. He bit him so hard the man screamed. Then the other one kicked Pip away." Her voice cracked. "I thought that was the end. I heard him yelp, and then everything went dark." Daniel swallowed hard, unable to hide the tremor of anger beneath his breath. "They drove into the woods," she continued, "pulled me out, threw me against the ground, took my money, took everything. When one of them realized Pip wasn't dead, he tried to grab him. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But Pip ran, fast, and the man slipped while chasing him. She squeezed the puppy's paw tighter. He kept barking at them from the trees, distracting them, leading them away from me. She took a shuddering breath. He saved me. Over and over. The paramedic glanced at Daniel, eyes widening in disbelief. The woman continued, voice trembling. After the men left, I tried to crawl. But I couldn't move. Everything hurt. I screamed for help, but no one heard. I thought I would die there. Her eyes softened as she looked at Pip. But he came back, limping, crying. But he came back for me. He stayed with me all night. He tried to keep me warm. She sniffed. And in the morning, he ran off. I didn't know why. I thought he was leaving because he was hurt. Daniel's throat tightened. But he wasn't leaving me, she whispered, smiling weakly. He was looking for someone who would listen. Pip climbed onto her chest, nuzzling her chin lovingly. She looked at Daniel with gratitude burning through her exhaustion. He chose you, she said softly. Thank you for following him. Daniel placed his hand over hers, voice thick with emotion. No, he whispered. Thank him. He's the reason you're alive. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the slow, steady rhythm of the woman's breathing. She had been moved from emergency care to a small recovery room, still bruised and weak, but finally stable. A dim lamp cast a warm glow across the walls, making the space feel safer, gentler, than the cold forest she had nearly died in. Daniel stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the moonlight spill onto the floor. Pip sat curled at the foot of the woman's bed, his tiny head resting near her hand, refusing to sleep until she woke again. It should have been a moment of relief. It should have felt like victory. But Daniel's chest was tight. Too tight. The weight of the day, the fear, the blood, the helplessness, crashed over him all at once. He exhaled shakily and rubbed a hand over his face. He had seen death before. He had delivered bad news to families. He had walked into scenes far worse than he liked to remember. But something about this, about a tiny puppy dragging him into danger, about a woman clinging to life in a hidden corner of the woods, hit him deeper than anything had in years. Pip suddenly lifted his head and looked at Daniel with questioning eyes. Daniel tried to smile. It didn't work. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. The woman, still sleeping, looked peaceful now, so different from the broken, half-conscious figure they had pulled from the forest floor. Daniel gently adjusted the blanket around her shoulder. You did good, he whispered to Pip without looking up. The puppy crawled into Daniel's lap, pressing his tiny body into the officer's chest. Daniel hesitated, surprised by the sudden affection. Then, slowly, he wrapped his arms around the little dog, holding him tighter than he expected. And that was it. The moment his walls finally cracked. Daniel lowered his head, eyes squeezing shut as a hot tear slipped down his cheek. Then another. And another. He buried his face into Pip's fur, his body trembling as everything he'd been holding in broke free. You saved her, he whispered, voice breaking. You saved her when no one else could. Pip let out a soft whine and nuzzled deeper into his arms. Daniel pulled back slightly, wiping at his face, embarrassed even though no one was watching. But Pip didn't judge, didn't question. He simply lifted his small paw and placed it gently on Daniel's chest. The simplest gesture. But it shattered Daniel completely. He let out a shaky breath. I don't know how you found me, or why you chose me. But thank you. Pip's tail thumped softly against Daniel's leg. Daniel looked at the woman, then at the puppy, then back at the woman again. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a calling, a connection stitched together through pain and loyalty. And Daniel knew. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The next morning arrived slowly, wrapped in soft, golden sunlight that filtered through the hospital blinds. The world outside buzzed with distant city noise, but inside the quiet recovery room, everything felt suspended in gentle calm. Daniel had stayed the night sitting in a chair beside the bed with Pip curled tightly on his lap. At some point, exhaustion had pulled him into a light sleep, but Pip never rested for long. Every few minutes he would lift his head, check on the woman, then settle back down as if keeping a silent watch. A soft rustling broke the silence. Daniel jolted awake. The woman's fingers twitched, her breathing shifted. Slowly, carefully, her eyelids fluttered open. Pip reacted before Daniel could move, scrambling up her blanket with desperate little paws. The woman blinked, disoriented for a second, until she saw him. "Pip," she whispered, her voice cracking. The puppy let out a high-pitched cry, tail wagging so wildly his whole body shook. He climbed onto her chest, careful but overflowing with joy, nose nuzzling her chin, tears shining in his eyes. Yes, tears. Tiny, trembling tears. The woman's lips quivered as she wrapped her bruised arms around him. "You came back," she whispered breathlessly. "You really came back." She exhaled, a broken but relieved sound, holding him as tightly as her injuries allowed. Pip pressed his head beneath her chin and released a soft, shuddering whimper that sounded like weeks of fear melting away at once. Daniel stepped closer, unable to stop the warmth rising in his chest. "He never gave up on you," he said quietly. "Not for 1 second." The woman looked at Daniel, eyes filling. "Thank you for believing him." Daniel shook his head. "He did all the work. I just listened." A nurse walked in just then, pausing at the sight of the reunion. Her hand flew to her chest. "Oh my goodness, that's the puppy we heard about?" She smiled. "Looks like someone's very attached." The woman stroked Pip's fur, smiling softly through her pain. "He saved my life," she whispered. "He's my hero." Pip let out a proud bark, tiny but full of spirit. As the nurse checked vitals, she gently informed the woman, "You're stable now. You were lucky. Very lucky. Another hour out there and we might not have reached you in time." The woman's eyes dropped to Pip again. "I'm only alive because of him." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "When we found you, he wouldn't let anyone near you at first. He kept crying for us to hurry." The woman caressed Pip's face, eyes shimmering. "Of course he did. He's always sensed things before anyone else." Pip curled happily against her, content at last. The nurse finished her checks and left the room quietly, leaving the three of them in a peaceful silence. The woman looked at Daniel again, gratitude soft but powerful. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," Daniel said gently. "Just heal. He needs you." Her smile deepened. "And what about you?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at Pip, and something unspoken passed between them. Something that felt like destiny. 2 days passed, each one filled with slow healing, police reports, and steady progress. The woman, whose name Daniel learned was Maya Thompson, regained her strength little by little. The bruises faded. The swelling eased. Her voice, once broken and fragile, grew steadier with each passing hour. Through it all, Pip hardly left her side, curling against her hip like a tiny guardian angel who refused to sleep without feeling her heartbeat. But Pip didn't stay still for long. Every time Daniel entered the room, the little puppy's ears perked up. His tail began to wag. He would leap from Maya's lap, rushing to Daniel as if greeting someone he belonged to. Maya noticed it immediately. "You two formed quite a bond," she said softly one afternoon, stroking Pip's back. Daniel looked away with a small smile. "He's something else." "He chose you before he ever found me help," Maya whispered. "Dogs don't do that unless they see something special." Daniel didn't answer. Compliments still made him uncomfortable. Instead, he crouched down and let Pip crawl excitedly into his arms. The puppy licked his chin, tail wagging so fast it blurred. Daniel chuckled for the first time in days. "You're a brave little guy," he murmured, scratching behind Pip's ear. Maya watched the moment with a look Daniel almost missed, softness mixed with something deeper, something like a question she wasn't sure she should ask. The room fell quiet as Pip settled contentedly against Daniel's chest. Maya finally spoke. "Officer Reed, I need to ask you something important." Daniel straightened, worry instantly rising. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she assured him gently. "This is about Pip." Daniel's hand stilled on Pip's back. "Go on." Maya took a slow breath, her fingers twisting nervously in the blanket. "I'm not fully recovered. My doctor said healing will take time, therapies, rest, and after what happened out there, I don't feel safe going home right away." Her voice trembled slightly. "I can't take care of him the way he deserves right now." Pip's tiny head lifted at the sound of her voice, his eyes filled with concern. Maya swallowed hard. Would you keep him? Just until I'm better?" Daniel blinked. "Me? You're the only person he trusts besides me," Maya said softly. "He followed you. He begged you. He led you to me because he sensed you'd help." She offered a faint, grateful smile. "And you did." Daniel looked down at Pip. The little pup looked up with eyes full of innocence and devotion, eyes that had guided him through terror, through courage, through the deepest parts of the woods, all because he believed Daniel could save someone he loved. Daniel let out a quiet exhale. "I'd be honored," he said, voice thick with emotion. Maya's shoulders relaxed with relief. "Thank you." Pip barked happily as if he understood every word, but Maya wasn't finished. "Daniel, one more thing." He raised an eyebrow. "When I'm better, when everything settles, I want him to stay in both our lives, not just mine. He needs you, too." Daniel froze for a moment, not out of hesitation but from the sudden swell of warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging, connection, purpose. He nodded slowly. "I think I need him, too." Pip pounced onto his lap again, tail thumping like a drum. Maya laughed softly. "Looks like you just got promoted. Official temporary guardian of the bravest puppy in the world." Daniel scratched Pip's chin. "I'll take the job." As Daniel prepared to leave the room, Pip scrambled after him, eager to follow. Daniel scooped him up, holding him close. Maya watched them with a smile that reached her eyes. "Take good care of him." Daniel paused at the door. "With my life," he promised. Pip nestled against his chest, safe at last. A wounded woman healing, a brave puppy finding his protector, a hardened officer rediscovering his heart, and though none of them knew what the future held, one thing was certain: their story was only just beginning.